She was kissed and groped against her will by comedian Al Franken, who is now a fairly well-known Democratic senator representing the state of Minnesota. Trace Gallagher has been on this story all day, and he joins us for the latest. Trace?
Tucker, the allegations you mentioned come from the radio and television personality who says the growing Me Too movement is what gave her the courage to fight back against a sitting U.S. senator. Radio news anchor Leanne Tweeden is accusing Al Franken actually in two separate incidents that happened during that USO tour back in 2006 when Franken was then a cast member for Saturday Night Live, including one that happened during a rehearsal for a skit that Tweeden would consider sexual assault. Here she is.
Put his hand on the back of my head, and he mashed his face against, I mean, it happened so fast, and he just mashed his lips against my face, and he stuck his tongue in my mouth so fast. I remember I pushed him off with my hands, and I said, if you ever do that to me again, I'm not going to be so nice about it the second time.
The second incident is this picture taken on a plane ride home from the tour where she claims that Al Franken groped her while she was asleep. Al Franken says he doesn't recall the rehearsal incident the way Tweeden does, but he did apologize, saying, and I'm quoting, "I respect women. I don't respect men who don't. And that fact that my own actions have given people a good reason to doubt that makes me feel ashamed." As for the photograph, Franken says, quote, "I don't know what was in my head when I took that picture, and it doesn't matter. There's no excuse. I look at it now, and I feel disgusted with myself." Democratic leaders immediately called for a Senate Ethics Committee investigation, with Chuck Schumer saying, quote, "Sexual harassment is never acceptable and must not be tolerated. I hope and expect that the Ethics Committee will fully investigate this troubling incident, as they should with any credible allegation of sexual harassment." Al Franken says that he will fully cooperate with the investigation, though Politico is now reporting there's already talk among some Democrats that because the picture we showed you earlier is so damaging, that Al Franken might be forced to resign. Tucker.
Trace Gallagher from L.A. Thanks a lot, Trace. Chadwick Moore is a journalist and a frequent guest on the show. He joins us from New York tonight. So, Chadwick, I know Al Franken pretty well. I've known him for a long time. I honestly never thought of him as a sexual harasser. I have thought of him a lot as a not a very nice person who, and this is an open secret in Washington, who mistreats his staff. He's a screamer, who takes credit for other people's work. It's basically horrible to those beneath him. And all of that, and I've seen it, has been excused for many years because his politics are mainstream politics here. He's a liberal. And I see this as a theme. Like, if you have the right politics, you get away with kind of whatever you want. You're excused by the left. Am I making that up in my mind?
You certainly aren't making that up in your mind. That is how it is. Look at Hollywood. Look at everything that's happening now. All these allegations that are coming down. And even just aside from basic hypocrisy, right? We have everyone on the left, especially who's coming after Roy Moore, who's been coming after Roy Moore. Now, you know, when it's their own team, they don't know what to do. This isn't merely hypocrisy. There's something far more sinister, I believe, happening on the left when they've built a party platform that basically tells people like women, like gays, like blacks, that you're victims and we're here to protect you and the other side hates you. And then what happens when people come out, especially in these allegations now? Well, sometimes the women are attacked by the left. You know, Joy Behar famously called Bill Clinton's accusers tramps. So it becomes even more sinister when you realize that they don't care about these people, about these groups that they purport to be standing up for. They only care about one thing, and that one thing is power.
Yeah, accumulating power. I've always thought that the root of all wisdom was knowing how flawed you are, and that's a hedge against self-righteousness. But I've noticed, and particularly in the case of Al Franken, an overweening self-righteousness. I mean, Franken is the first one to stand up in a hearing and lecture people about how he's a lot better than they are. Do you see a connection between outward expressions of self-righteousness and people's secret personal behavior? Am I imagining that too?
I absolutely agree with you. I heard someone say the other day, as soon as you hear a man call himself a feminist, you can start the clock on the rape charges. I believe it was Milo Yiannopoulos who said that. It's absolutely true. The more you're virtue signaling, you see this a lot with race, right? And I've noticed this my entire life. You see this a lot with these sort of white, liberal, race virtue signalers who are all day long talking about Black Lives Matter, yet they're the first person to cross the street if a black man's walking towards them late at night. They're the first person to be, very rude to their brown-skinned nanny or what have you. It's so obvious that there's some sort of cover going here. When you see someone who's trying so hard to virtue signal that they care for people, these groups of people, well, maybe you should look at that. If they need to collectivize people like that.
It's true. I once asked Al Sharpton if he was a bigot, and he said to me in a moment of candor, he said, the only group I really don't like, white liberals, because they patronize me. And I thought that, there's something to this. I'm not a shrink, so I don't fully understand the syndrome here, but it's related. People who have thoughts they're ashamed of tend to attack other people and accuse them of having those thoughts.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And that spans the gamut when, people who maybe are a little too puritanical and some things turn out to have the nastiest secrets behind their...
Sweden described her encounter with Al Franken, the senator from Minnesota, the man who is supposedly the new conscience of the Senate. Yesterday, he was ripping up Justice Don Willett, the Texas Supreme Court Justice Don Willett, ripping him up and down because Texas Justice Don Willett, who is very funny on Twitter, had once tweeted something about how he wanted to legalize marriage to bacon because he liked bacon so much, and Al Franken thought that this was a slap at the gay community somehow, which is weird because gay people aren't bacon. But in any case, Al Franken apparently sexually harassed / assaulted Leanne Sweden. She said in an essay she described her encounter with Franken, whom she says used comedy as an excuse to be inappropriate, because comedians in Hollywood apparently are all inappropriate, from Louis C.K. to David Letterman. Sweden, a former model, was on her 9th tour with the USO and expected to be the event MC, but quickly discovered that Franken had penned a special skit for her to perform with him, and he'd included a kiss that he insisted they practice beforehand. So here is the actual essay. Quote, he repeated that actors really need to rehearse everything and that we must practice the kiss. I said, okay, so he would stop badgering me. We did the line leading up to the kiss, and then he came at me, put his hand on the back of my head, mashed his lips against mine, and aggressively stuck his tongue in my mouth. Okay, first of all, that is sexual assault, but I will say that every actor in Hollywood has apparently done this to every actress in Hollywood. Like, talk to any actress in this town, you'll see this is a very common occurrence. This is not letting Al Franken off the hook by any means. It's just to show you that in Hollywood, this stuff is supremely prevalent. He said, she says, I immediately pushed him away with both of my hands against his chest and told him if he ever did that to me again, I wouldn't be so nice about it the next time. I walked away. All I could think about was getting to a bathroom as fast as possible to rinse the taste of him out of my mouth. Okay. She said she didn't report Franken's behavior or the alleged assault to superiors, but did her best to stay out of Franken's way the rest of the tour. He repaid her, she says, by peppering her with insults and drawing devil horns on pictures she signed for the troops. Then, on the flight home, as Tweeden slept in her Kevlar vest and helmet, she says Franken groped her while he posed for this photo. Do we have a picture? Do we have this photo? This is the one that I'd asked to pull. In any case, it's a picture of Al Franken reaching out, and she's sleeping. She's wearing a Kevlar vest, and he's standing over her, big grin on his face, and his hands poised above her boobs. Right, there it is. Yeah, there's a senator from Minnesota groping or attempting to grope a sleeping woman. Just all class is Senator Al Franken. And she says, I couldn't believe it. He groped me without my consent while I was asleep. I felt violated all over again, embarrassed, belittled, humiliated. How dare anyone grab my breast like this and think it's funny? I told my husband everything that happened and showed him the picture. She claimed she was too scared to complain, worried about the potential backlash and possibility that lobbing a sexual harassment allegation against a famous comedian would have repercussions to her career, which it would. The way that it works in Hollywood, because Hollywood is a scummy place, is that if you complain about sexual harassment, no one will hire you ever again. Okay, this is reality, and it's horrifying. It's really disgusting. You're considered a hard to put up with. You're considered somebody who doesn't get it and isn't cool in Hollywood if you don't put up with men acting like pervs or anyone acting like a perv. If somebody gropes you and you say anything about it, this makes you a prude in Hollywood. Seriously. Al Franken has now responded to the allegations, saying he sends his sincerest apologies and that the photo was, quote, clearly intended to be funny. Oh, boy. He says, I certainly don't remember the rehearsal for the skit in the same way, but I send my sincerest apologies to Leanne. As to the photo, it was clearly intended to be funny, but wasn't. I shouldn't have done it. Al Franken is in serious poo-poo now. He's in serious trouble. And we're about to find out whether Democrats are flaming hypocrites, because they, of course, have been calling for Roy Moore to be expelled from the Senate if he were elected, and forever Republicans distance themselves from Roy Moore, the Senate Republican from Alabama. Quick correction I want to make on the show. So I keep saying for the last 2 days, the snot has addled my brain from this cold, but I kept saying that Richard Burr was the senator from Alabama. It's Richard Shelby, of course. In any case, the Democrats have been calling for Roy Moore to step down. Anyone who does not call for Roy Moore to step down is obviously horrifying. But are they saying the same things about Al Franken? Well, we know that several of the senators have been running away from questions about this. They've been legitimately running from the press. And that makes perfect sense, because none of this matters to you if it's a member of your own political party, right? There's a bunch of Sasha Stone is a writer over at, I guess, Awards Daily, and she said, "Sorry, but if what Al Franken is doing in that photo is sexual harassment, we're going to need a bigger boat. Come on."